Wait a minute. Hold up. Go back.
Oh my god, that's so dumb.
Witness me!
The chase sequence, I'm just not buying it once.
I hate the CG punch zoom. I hate that.
You hate the CG punch zooms?
I hate CG punch zooms. They're not necessary.
Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Stick around to the end to see how you can get 3 months free of membership.
Hey guys, welcome to Visual Effects Artists React. And today is, oh man, what a special day. Not only do we have Clint, but today, we are served up with some of the finest visual effects you have ever seen. I'm so excited to see it. Clint, what are these clips we're gonna see?
We're gonna see some real janky VFX.
Wait, really? This is a janky episode?
I got some janky VFX for you.
Where's this jank? What's the source of this jank?
All right, look, they've been making Resident Evil movies for far too long.
Resident Evil? Resident Evil has brought me so much joy.
But this latest movie is far beyond, like, it just falls off. I'm gonna try my best to focus on just the VFX.
You can still enjoy bad things.
No,
it's funny.
It's not one of those.
Oh.
It's not even one of those.
Is this like one of those sad, bad ones? Before we watch Welcome to New Raccoon City, let's take a peek at Welcome to Raccoon City.
That punch out camera shake.
It feels like they took a bunch of super large scale explosions that are normally played at slower speed because they're supposed to be larger and in the background, but it's in the foreground. It should be moving way faster.
It's like they put like 3 20-foot explosions in the scene and they're all like 10 feet tall.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's a slow-mo shot or if it's actual full speed.
Well, it's slow because
it feels like halfway.
It's big explosions made small, so they act really slow.
Right.
So
but,
it makes it feel slow motion.
Yeah. So normally when you're compositing fire elements like this, you got to make sure that the speed of the fire elements is scaled to the scene.
You can cheat it a little bit, but you can't cheat it a lot. It's all about the speed of the flames. Like how fast is the turbulence going? How fast are they rising? Like temperature, all that crap. You could technically make like a torch fire a little bit bigger. You might even be able to turn it into candlelight if you did some tricks, but you can't make it 5 feet tall.
Yeah, general rule of thumb is that the smaller an explosion element is, the faster it needs to be run. So if you're shrinking down something, increase the speed of it as well.
And in this case, they were pressed for time, as usually always are as a VFX artist. And you could either simulate an explosion where you would probably get more accurate results. That's a whole other thing. In this case, they're using stock footage comped over this truck. And when you're pulling super large scale explosions and scaling them down to fit your scene, you really gotta be aware of the speed at which those explosions are moving.
That's the most casual firewalk. Was that an actual, that was obviously there was CG fire on that, but was there a basis of like an actual fire suit?
Yeah, I think that's 100% CG, bro.
It was definitely CG we're looking at. I'm just curious if there's real fire underneath it, you know?
I think the dude is CG.
The whole dude?
I think the whole dude is CG, and the reason they're not flailing is because you know how difficult it's gonna be to comp 2D fire elements onto this? So they're like, just be as still as possible and give me this so we can make our job as easy as possible with the fire.
I don't know, knowing nothing about this, it feels like if this is some zombie dude coming in, it's like, that feels like a directing note to me. You are casual as you're burning. You've done that before.
But not that casually, not that casually.
Oh yeah.
I'm ready, man.
Feel safe?
I'm ready. So the idea is that like, if you're standing there, the fire will be in your face, in your nose, in your eyes. If you're moving forward, it'll be behind you. So this just looks like the full back, whereas...
See how it's illuminating you though?
It
like
is.
your clothing is being lit.
So we can safely say what they're doing is they have a guy walk through a dark room and then they slap CG fire all over him and then they hit render and then they move on.
This is pretty good reference though. Like, look at the exposure of the actual fire itself. It's mostly clipping, you know? Like all of the fire, the white hot in the middle, like that's just too bright for the sensor and the exposure. And we're starting to get some of that detail back at the edges of the fire where it's starting to cool off. You could drop the exposure and get more detail in the fire, but then the body would be more dark, right?
Exactly, yeah, you'd lose the background too.
It's definitely some visual effects fire in the Resident Evil shot. We're not saying it's practical or digital here. It's just, is it practical foundation with a digital top or is it completely digital?
They probably had a real guy do the walk, but they replaced him with the 3D model effectively. And that's really all we're seeing at this point is just like the stuff they tracked onto him. Everything has like a certain speed, movement to it, and the stuff on the back is like turbo, Makes me feel like they're combining a full body simulation with the fire, and then using some elements to like amp it up, basically.
Yeah, I think you're right, Sam. I think there is a basis foundation of a simulated fire with a bunch of big, larger scale, high flame elements up at the top, especially around like his shoulder blades up.
You ugly. Here we go. We finally got it. We finally got what we were waiting for.
It looks like Doom, like really good Doom in-game footage, like cutscene footage.
That's
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold up. Go back.
Oh my god, it's so dumb. That's just like...
The shot is basically informing me I'm about to see a rocket go down the dude's mouth. And then it immediately cuts to an explosion with the dude in the foreground tumbling away from it. So the tell for me is the directionality of the turbulence in a thing like this. It's very like, it's almost kind of creamy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you simulate an explosion, you basically have a bunch of little blocks in a 3D scene, and those blocks contain information like temperature, pressure, direction of forces.
These are voxels you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about voxels, yeah. And so the way those forces can go between the voxels ends up being very just like left, right, up, down, and that's just how voxels work. It's very just going in like these 90-degree angles as opposed to diagonally. It's something I see in every single sort of smoke simulation. It's hard to get around, especially in something kind of small and turbulent like this.
But once the explosion resolves and you get the nice smoke, that usually looks really nice, but we're talking about the beginning of an explosion here, which I think is the hardest part to do. So they're like blocking out the beginning part of the explosion with a bright white light, which is probably, the way to go. You hide the jankiest parts of the beginning of that explosion, and it probably would happen in real life where there's a bright flash of light.
It's always about how would you do this in real life? If you're gonna have, let's say, a practical monster and you want a big practical rocket blast on it, it's like, what is that actually going to look like? And how do you recreate that? Versus here, which is basically they say, all right, fire simulation, go, boop, element done, rendered. Fire doesn't spawn out of nothingness. What's our charge? What's our detonation device gonna look like? What's creating that initial blast? There's all these elements here. Not to mention it's a rocket. Maybe it's more concussive. Maybe there's more sparks. Where's the shrapnel? Like, what are these additional elements that are exploding that give us context instead of this ethereal fire that's spawned out of nothingness, Because no explosion is just fire spawned out of nothingness. It's like gasoline. In this case, that would be gasoline. Maybe even they could do a propane kind of like charge or something like that.
A rocket launcher? Found it in first class.
We don't need to spend any more time on this movie. We can move on. I hate the CG punch zoom. I hate that.
You hate the CG punch zooms?
I hate CG punch zooms. They're not necessary.
What about when it's in outer space and you gotta really crop in?
No!
Did you see one single punch zoom in this entire sequence up until the point it got CG?
No, not at all. We need to spice it up with some sort of punchiness. Punch it up with a punch zoom.
Punch it up now.
Like the CG looks great.
It's fine.
It looks great.
I actually thought the CG looked great too. The worm looks pretty good because, for starters, it's well rendered. The scene has overcast lighting, and that lends itself to better renders because renders typically look pretty good with a very top-down, even softbox light. If you want something to look good, put a giant, even softbox above your render, like the Dark Knight garage, freaking Unbox Therapy garage.
At the same time, too, it's like an insanely render-intensive lighting environment to have a huge softbox like this, because to calculate that type of render, we're dealing with like 180 degrees of like a hemisphere of just like light angles hitting it on every like direction. And so there's tons of bounces and stuff like that. It looks really nice because it's a very like naturalistic approach to lighting it.
There's like some good subsurface scattering going on the top of it. The shading and ambient occlusion is nice. Like, I don't know, like the animation, it's all jiggly, it's well designed. But there are three things that make the compositing of this render look flawless to me. One, the lighting matches perfectly, the contrast matches perfectly, and the saturation of the colors match perfectly. Interesting choice, making it look like there's graffiti on this bug. It's very colorful, and there's a lot of real graffiti in the shot. There's a bunch of blues and oranges and reds. The bug also has those oranges and blues and reds, and they look like they belong together.
They match.
The dark value on the underside of the bug matches the dark values of the underside of the car, the underside of the scaffolding.
Yeah.
The highlights are catching perfectly. The highlights on the back of the bug match perfectly to the highlights up in the sky. Also, they're doing a great job of comping in that red mist earlier in the foreground between the bug and the camera. And they're hiding the ground interaction that the bug has, which is a great move. If your ground doesn't look entirely 100% solid and it's contact with the ground, then you just put a little bit of red mist there. Solid.
Yeah.
Good worm effects.
Not bad.
Hey guys, quick interruption to just let you know that the second episode of our Netflix show Punch for Punch just dropped on their YouTube channel. I recommend going to check it out. This one is all about stunt driving and how it gets done in the movies. We worked with real stunt drivers, and Guy even learned how to pull off some complicated tricks that expert stunt drivers use. Anyway, I just want to let you know, still watching Netflix is the YouTube channel that it's on. Check it out and enjoy the rest of this episode.
Oh, this is gonna be crazy.
Triceratops.
For those of you who don't know anything about Prehistoric Planet, if you've ever heard of the show Planet Earth, it's literally the same show, but instead of about animals, it's about dinosaurs.
Every time we see a dinosaur in Jurassic Park, it's doing something crazy and wacky for the sake of a scene, or someone's writing a scene where dinosaurs supposed to do something here. Versus this, which is
Just real life.
they're going, all right, how do these creatures actually act? Like, what is our best take on depicting the actions and the mind of these creatures? It is all about how you're trying to get an accurate look at how these creatures act.
Witness me! Witness me!
Oh my god. Look at these little guys.
Wow. Dude, I can feel like I can take my fingernails and go along its skin and go.
So a scene like this, the hard part is the animation and the modeling. Once you have that done, it's now down to rendering. You gotta light the scene and render it. And that, for a situation like this, pretty straightforward, I gotta be honest. You have the footage of the background. You have like this nice open area. So you have a bunch of trees in the back, and there's not really anything in the center. So the lighting setup, I imagine, is simply setting up a sun source and then a bunch of gobos blocking the light like the trees would.
What's a gobo, Wren?
A gobo is a shaped light pattern that is either blocking the light or projecting a pattern of light into a scene, such as the dappled tree lighting that we're seeing here. As these dinosaurs are walking forward, they're walking in and out of shades and light. But instead of modeling all of the trees around it, you just put a texture of like a bunch of leaves on a plane and you put it up out of view and you get the shadows from those leaves down on the dinosaur. It's a very efficient way to get very accurate lighting, and no one can ever tell.
But in this case, we're goboing the sun. So, so the light source is at an infinite distance, effectively.
Yeah, the light is parallel. And so I imagine what they did for this sequence is they probably have like these dinosaurs that are like this tall, and they put the gobos maybe like 2 or 3 times higher than their heads, just to simulate the canopy of the forest. So what makes a good dinosaur 3D model?
Enough polygons.
High resolution texture detail. Because look at them, they got freaking lizard skin and like reptile skin. It's not just scales, it's like a thick, knobbly skin. And so you just gotta have a lot of detail there. And of course, a lot of color variation.
It's a high-res model, but it's also use of a normal map and probably a displacement map that actually pushes the geometry for real, whereas the bump and the normal map cheat detail. And they're probably using all of that to get these beautiful results.
A normal map is just telling it that the light is going this way, but a displacement map is actually displacing the geometry at a sub-polygon level. You could see it if you were to put a rocky normal map on a sphere. Look at the edge of that sphere. It's gonna be perfectly smooth. But if you put a displacement map of the same type of texture on a sphere, you're looking at the edge of it and it will be bumpy because it's actually displacing it. The modeling of these dinosaurs, they're usually using a program like ZBrush or maybe Mudbox to actually sculpt it like you would out of clay. And they're putting huge amounts of detail into every square inch of these dinosaurs. And so they end up with these massively huge files for every single dinosaur. But then all of that detail gets baked down into image textures like normal maps and displacement maps so that the geometry can then be simplified so that it can be simulated.
It's easy to think about visual effects and go, oh, there's no creative tricks going on anymore. You know, back in the day when it was all practical effects, you know, they had to come up with such like creative solutions to like get a shot done. But when you look at these dinosaurs, like there's still a lot of tricks that are happening to get this level of detail. So all these mapping techniques are the trick, so to speak, to get all the cool moving skin and all that stuff dynamic, but still then have those close-ups where it's just like so incredibly high detailed, but it looks 3D still. It's like a combination of so many things. It's like, okay, excellent creature design team. We're doing the bone structure. We're doing the muscle structure. We're making a unique like dinosaur like skin like system that's totally different from like mammals. Animation. Is it raptors chasing a motorcycle? No. Like it's so instantly it's going to look more realistic because you're not putting them in unrealistic situations.
None of these sort of stylistic edge lights on the backs of velociraptors?
No. No more leaping raptors, you know, jumping at your car, or landing on the roof of your truck.
So, if we were to like pause on any of these shots, it looks composited well into the shot.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because everything's moving so fast and so blurry, and it's just like, I can tell there's a dinosaur generally chasing Chris Pratt on a bike. I mean, how much of a gripe do you guys have with the way the raptors run in this new Jurassic Park?
Like, I never see them act like dinosaurs. You know what I'm saying? Or like, I don't ever see them acting like animals. They're like missiles. So
Yeah,
to speak.
yeah,
You know?
they're always got freaking missile lock on. It's one of those sequences that looks super fun on paper. It's like, imagine a motorcycle sequence, but instead of motorbikes, it's raptors. It's like, yeah. And then like we're seeing, and it's like, I'm just not buying it once. Like the entire sequence, I'm just like, I'm not suspending my disbelief here. And that's my problem with it. And that, I don't know if that's the visual effects problem that's making me not suspend my disbelief, or if it's just the context and the situation.
It's
is
totally the
ridiculous.
context, and I think that it's a great time to talk about it. You know, like we don't need to talk about criticizing direction or writing and stuff, but like right now we have Prehistoric Planet, which really goes hard into trying to show these as real creatures, and then we have this here. If you're just watching Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies and that's your dinosaur content, like sure, that's fine. But the moment you start to actually get that other side of the spectrum, you can see what's really lacking when it comes to everything from like how they're being filmed to like the design and the modeling, the creature direction, all that stuff. Because like once you get that taste of going, okay, let's imagine they are creatures that are not intelligent, you know, they have tiny brains or, you know, very low-powered lizard brains. You know, like once you get that taste and come back to this, now you're like, wait a second, like I want more now. Like I need more than this if I want to be entertained by this.
No.
Here, it matches up pretty well. The color is pretty good. The light source is coming from the correct direction. Like, it's not wrong, so to speak. It just looks a little extra.
It's produced.
First off, it's the design. Like,
Yeah, it's
okay,
mean.
they're like, let's make them look evil and angry and super crazy and like, oh, they're villains. I feel like the first Jurassic Park is super scary because they're treating them like animals. You know, they're huge creatures and they're unpredictable and they're carnivores. Whereas here, it's like, you just can't shake the feeling that like these dinosaurs are like acting, you know? And once again, it's not like a flaw, so to speak. This is like, we're talking about like a total like direction here. But
This is intentional.
when you start to go down that path of like not having a creature or an animal act like itself, you show your cards there. You're like, okay, this is CG, this is fake.
You need subtlety and you need some realism, and, and no one's buying this because it's too maxed.
And that the problem that's stemming from that is now hurting the actual effects themselves because people aren't buying the situation and they're blaming it on the VFX.
Exactly, because like, the rendering's great, lighting's great, awesome shaders. Look at that awesome eyeball, subsurface scattering on the gums and tongue and lips and stuff there. Cool teeth, great displacement mass, scaling, hyper detailed texture. Great shot, well composited, well tracked. It's well animated. However, at the same time, it's like we're forgetting this is a lizard.
This is part of a much larger conversation, and I'd love to see that conversation down in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Like, where is too much when it comes to creating creatures?
Hi, Brandy O'Daniel here, and I used to be so stressed wondering how I was going to keep my internet data safe and secure. But courtesy of today's sponsor, ExpressVPN, life's so much better now. I can protect my internet data through and through on any device, however I access the internet, just by using ExpressVPN. You see, if you don't know, ExpressVPN works by first and foremost giving your data an additional layer of encryption as it's out on the open internet. This means it's less susceptible to being stolen by third-party hackers hackers or third-party advertisers who want to steal and sell your data. Who wants that? Nobody wants that. The best part about ExpressVPN is that it gives you access to content that might not be available in your country or region. For example, we're here in the United States, we can't access the entire Studio Ghibli library on Netflix, but if we use a VPN, which will tell the internet that we're accessing a platform like Netflix from an entirely different location, we can then get access to that entire library. And now we love ExpressVPN here at Corridor Digital, but if you don't believe me, just know this. They've been rated #1 by Forbes and Tech Radar. And they've got servers in over 94 countries, meaning that they're one of the fastest VPN services out there. You can use them on any device: phone, tablet, laptop, PC, TV, smart fridge. And if you guys are interested in getting access to content that might not be available to you and protecting your internet data as it's out on the open internet, click the link in the description below or go to expressvpn.com/corridorcrew where you can find out how to get 3 months free. If you need me, I'll be in the water.
What an episode. That was a fun one.
Yeah. A lot of speculation there. You know, like there's not a ton of behind the scenes material for some of this stuff right now, but it's good to look at it because it's all fresh and it's brand new. This is like cutting edge stuff. All the Jurassic World stuff, all this Prehistoric Planet stuff. Like this is the top of the line stuff when it comes to creature visual effects right now. So I think it's super important to be able to play and react and watch this stuff, even when the information about how it's made isn't out there yet. Still a lot we can garner from it, you know, everything from, you know, context, animation, the research that goes into how these creatures behave and react, and all this stuff. Like there is knowledge out there that we can still apply to it. And yeah, I really enjoyed going through these clips. So
Thanks for watching. This was a really fun one. We will see you next week. Bye.
bye.